Welcome back to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed, and make sure to like, follow, and subscribe on our YouTube page at the Dave Smith Unleashed Podcast, at the Dave Smith Unleashed Podcast. And always like to kick it around and chat with you on the YouTube page in the comment section. Always love you to subscribe and always love you to follow us. And speaking of follow, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dave Sports God, at Dave Sports God. And I'm always talking about when the next show is going to be, who the guest is going to be, what time it's going to be. So make sure to follow us on Twitter and especially on the YouTube page at the Dave Smith Unleashed Podcast. Well, what are we going to talk about today? Of course, the college football national championship game on Monday night, Indiana against Miami. And Indiana, you talk about a storybook season. They have capped off what is, in my opinion, the single greatest turnaround, the single greatest accomplishment in the history of college football, and maybe in the history of all college sports. Now, let's go back and look at this a little bit. Dave Smith Unleashed brought to you by MTS Transportations. And mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off on your next shipment for all your shipping, trucking, and freight needs. There's only one business to call, and that's MTS Transportations at 800-640-6873. MTS Transportations, 800-640-6873. In 2023, the year before they hired Curt Cignetti, they went 3-9. And out of those 3 wins, 2 of them were against Akron and Indiana State. And Akron took them into 4 overtimes that year. So really they had 1 win. The year before that, in 2022, they go 4-8. 2 of the wins against Western Kentucky and Idaho. The year before that, in 2021, Indiana goes 2-10. And the 2 wins again against Western Kentucky and Idaho. So really, in my opinion, that's a winless season. And Indiana, forever, has been the worst program in the history of college football, in Division I college football. They have more losses than any school, over 900 before Cignetti got there, in the history of college football. Now, when we talk about the great turnarounds in the history of the sport, you got to go to Kansas State back in the 90s when they hired Bill Snyder. Since World War II, Kansas State, if I remember correctly at the time, from World War II into the 90s, Kansas State had the worst winning percentage and was the worst program in the history of Division I college football. They were a laughingstock. They were a joke. They were a scrimmage for Nebraska and Oklahoma back in the day in the Big 8. A glorified scrimmage against practice squad players. That's what Kansas State was. And then they hired Bill Snyder. And Bill Snyder decided what we need here are wins. So he scheduled like 3 cupcakes a year, 3 weak opponents just to get 3 wins on the board. And then he started recruiting. And he built the program with junior college players. And back then, it was junior college to do a quick turnaround, not the NIL and the transfer portal like it is today. So he used the junior college system and weakened the schedule up. And all of a sudden, Kansas State was rolling. And he had a top 10 program before too long and a team that was knocking on the door for national championship. So I think up until Cignetti, I think Bill Snyder probably did, and Kansas State, it was the greatest turnaround in the history of college football, but not anymore. And let's give some credit to the other team on the field last night, the Miami Hurricanes, when we talk about great turnarounds. If you're old enough to remember, in 1979, Miami's program was struggling so mightily that they had a meeting with their board of regents, and they took a vote on whether to drop down into Division II or Division III. And become a minor football program because they were spending a lot of money and they weren't winning. And they figured it wasn't worth the cost. And they got some boosters and they got some old alums and they talked to regents, okay, let's give this one more shot. So they decided we're going to stay in Division I, we're going to spend some money, we're going to hire a good coach, and let's see what happens. They hired Howard Schnellenberger in 1979. And instead of dropping down into Division III or whatever they were going to do, instead of abandoning the football program, in just 4 years, in 1983, the Miami Hurricanes won the national championship with a win in the Orange Bowl of what people then considered the greatest college football team of all time, the 1983 Nebraska Cornhuskers with Turner Gill and Mike Rozier and Irving Fryer and company. The Miami upset them in the Orange Bowl and won a national championship. Then they won another in 87. They won another in 89. They won another in 91. They won another in 2002, I think it was. And that 2002 Miami team is the greatest college football team of all time, in my opinion, followed closely by LSU 2019. And who knows? Maybe we'll be talking about this Indiana team from Monday night. Who knows? But it was a great turnaround at Kansas State. It was a fantastic turnaround at Miami back in 1979. Look, if that vote had gone the other way, Miami goes to Division III, and we never hear of him again. Instead, that vote narrowly passed to keep Division I. They decided to spend some money. They bring in Schnellenberger. And 5 national championships later, and it was almost the 6th against Indiana on Monday night. I tell you what, in my humble opinion, Miami is the single greatest program in the history of college sports. 5 national championships between 1983 and 2002, and almost the 6th on Monday night. But everything pales in comparison to what Curt Cignetti has done at Indiana. And I just went over the obituary, what they were in 2021 and 22 and 23. Then they hired Curt Cignetti, who turned around the program at James Madison. James Madison, a pretty decent Division I program, and he did a great job there, but that's a far cry from going into the Big Ten. And at his initial press conference, they asked Cignetti about what his plans were, and tell us a little bit about yourself. And he looked up at the reporters and said, I win. Google me. I win. Google me. And boy, has he turned out to be a prophet. And then modern college football, he was kind of ahead of the curve of everybody. He brought in all kinds of transfer portal guys and brought in some NIL money led by Mark Cuban, an Indiana alum making gigantic donations to the program, millions and millions of dollars. And in his first year, last season, Indiana went 10-2. They 11-2, excuse me. They started out 10-0. And then they lost to Ohio State, who went on to win the national championship last year. And then they lost in the first round of the college football playoff to a very good Notre Dame team, 27-17. But they're on their way. They got Fernando Mendoza at quarterback. They've got all the transfer portal guys, and they're ready this year. And they finished off a 16-0 season last night with a hard-fought win over a very good Miami team, 27-21 in Miami. Basically, it was on Miami's home field, but it wasn't really a home game because there were more Indiana fans there last night than there were Miami fans. But what a tremendous game. The Heisman Trophy winner, and I tell you what, I don't think Fernando Mendoza played very well last night until the fourth quarter. He looked rattled. He was holding onto the ball too long. He was making too many, he was taking too many sacks. And I was saying to myself, boy, I wonder if the Raiders are having second thoughts here about making him the first pick in the draft. He doesn't have overwhelming arm strength. He doesn't have a lot of speed running the ball. But, of course, we could have said the same thing about Tom Brady, couldn't we? That was a wrap on him when he came in. And a lot of NFL quarterbacks aren't great athletes. But if you stay composed in the pocket, if you make plays in the fourth quarter, if you stay cool under pressure, that's a lot more important, in my opinion, than running fast and having an arm where you can throw it 100 yards. And he didn't look good last night, Fernando Mendoza. Didn't look good until the fourth quarter. Again, he looked rattled. He held onto the ball too long. And I said to myself while I was watching this, boy, he's getting a taste of what life in the NFL is going to be like because Miami has an awesome deep. Miami's front four is awesome. NFL players on the defensive line. And this is a taste of what Fernando's going to get in the NFL. And he's not handling it very well. Again, but he showed his character and he showed what a great player he is in the fourth quarter. As he marched Indiana down the field, he converted 2 4th and 5s. On that winning touchdown march. And a play that will go down in history. When we look at the history of college football, that play on 4th and 5 from the Miami 8-yard line, when he dropped back to pass on a quarterback draw, cut to his right, spun, broke 2 tackles, and then leaped into the air and dove into the end zone, that play is going to live in infamy. That picture of him diving, it's going to be like, remember when Bobby Orr scored the winning Stanley Cup goal back in 1970 when he was flying through the air like a bird, and the images that last forever. This is one with him flying through the air like a bird. John Elway doing the whirly bird when he won the Super Bowl. This is going to last forever. Fernando Mendoza diving into the end zone. He made plays when it mattered. The 2 back shoulder throws to Bennett. That's straight out of the Aaron Rodgers book, those back shoulder throws. I tell you what, to me, I don't know if he's going to be a great NFL quarterback. I think he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. Again, he's not a great athlete, doesn't have a great arm, but you could say that about a lot of guys. You could say that about Drew Brees. You can say that about Peyton Manning. You can say that about Tom Brady. It doesn't really matter. It's all about staying composed, throwing on time, throwing accurately, and taking what the defense gives you. And I think he's going to be a really good NFL quarterback, if you ask me. Now, by the way, his brother was supposed to take over next year. as the quarterback at Indiana, but he announced today, his younger brother, that he's transferring and entering the portal, and he's not going to be at Indiana next year because Josh Hoover from TCU has announced that he's transferring to Indiana, and he threw for 56 touchdowns the last 2 years. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So he's going to be the new quarterback at Indiana, and Fernando's younger brother is going to be, unfortunately, going into the portal, which is probably the right decision because he's not going to play next year. But let's talk about somebody with big balls. Now, I don't think Curt Cignetti coached a particularly good game last night. He screwed up the clock at the end of the first half. His clock management at the end of the first half was an absolute disaster. And he burned 2 timeouts early, and he only had 1 left with 8 minutes to go in the game. And, boy, that play, that 3rd and 8 play when he ran up the middle for 3 yards and settled for a field goal, when a first down would have ended the game, I said, boy, that's going to come back to bite him. Carson Beck gets the ball back with 1:40 left. And Miami almost came back. He threw that interception near the goal line at the end. So I don't think Cignetti coached a great game last night. I thought the play calling was terrible. Too many power runs up the middle. His clock management was awful. But I tell you what, you talk about a set of big testicles. Going for it on 4th and 5 near midfield and converting with the back shoulder throw. Going for it, I couldn't believe he went for it on 4th and 5 on the 8-yard line. But he called a timeout, went for it, and called it. That was a great play, that quarterback draw. Touchdown, Indiana. I tell you what, that was fantastic. And big balls on the coach. Kudos for going for it 2 times. I don't think he coached particularly well. The clock management was awful. But I tell you, the play that cost Miami the game was that punt block. And I don't know what that punter was thinking. He ran straight to his right, kicked it on the run, and kicked it straight into an on-rushing defender who would have had no chance to block it had he stayed in place. He kind of ran into that rusher himself, blocks it with the right hand. Indiana recovers in the end zone, and that's it. I'm telling you, that's it. That cost him the game. Miami wins that game, if not for the block punt and the touchdown by Indiana. Comes down to the little things. Came down to special teams. Miami gives up the punt block for a touchdown. They missed the field goal on a doink in the first half. That's 10 points given away. So, but you can say that about just about any game. You can point at little things, this and that, if that would have happened. Bottom line is, Indiana went 16-0. They're the first team to win 16 games since Yale in 1894. Now, my dad told me that was the greatest college football team of all time. The Yale Bulldogs in 1894 that won 16 games. But this was incredible. 16-0. He is 27-2. Curt Cignetti, since he took over at Indiana, the single greatest turnaround, the single greatest job of coaching that I have ever seen in college football, and maybe in all the professional sports. Absolutely incredible. Who would have ever thought the Indiana University national champions, 16-0, they beat Ohio State, they beat Penn State, they beat Miami. 27-2 the last 2 years. I think they're 17-1, 18-1, whatever it is in the Big Ten the last 2 years. And by the way, the Big Ten is the dominant conference in college football now, with 3 national championships in a row from 3 different teams. So kudos to Indiana. Kudos to the single greatest turnaround and greatest accomplishment in the history of college football. The dive into the end zone by Mendoza will live in infamy as one of the great plays in college football. And the great story with his mom, sick with MS up in the stands, and his father played with Mario Cristobal in high school in Miami. And the fact that Mendoza wanted to play at Miami, grew up 2 miles away from the campus, a Cuban kid, asked them to try out. They didn't recruit him. He said, well, Manny Diaz, who was the coach at the time, can I come on and walk out, try out as a walk-on? Manny said, no, you can't even do that. You're not good enough to even try out as a walk-on. Well, who has the last laugh now? Heisman Trophy national champion. And he defeats, and you know what? He's taken the high road all throughout his career in Indiana, but he said it last night. I wanted to play here. They didn't recruit me. They wouldn't even let me come on as a walk-on. Well, how about this? He finally brought it up last night. Wow. Kudos to Indiana. Kudos to Fernando Mendoza. Kudos to the single greatest turnaround I have ever seen, not only in college football, but in professional sports. What a great story. Hoosiers. And a great story from Miami as well. Well, that's it for me. Make sure to follow me on the YouTube page at the Dave Smith Unleashed Podcast. And, of course, on Twitter at Dave Sports God. And we'll talk to you next time right here on Dave Smith Unleashed.